everybody, today I wanted to go through how you can digitize physical artwork. So it might be that you have got illustrations for a children's picture book, or maybe you have got some art you want to use on the cover of your book. And whether that's something you've produced yourself or whether you've had an artist produce it and they have sent it to you, you have got a physical piece of artwork that you need to turn into a digital file so that you can manipulate it for your final book files. And of course you might be coming to this video not as an author but as somebody who is trying to digitize artwork for another purpose, and the technique is the same, it's just the outcome that's different, so this will still be helpful for you. Now there are essentially two ways of going about this. One is to scan the artwork and the other is to photograph it, and I've done both of these, so I'm going to give you some pros and cons and some hints that will help you when you come to go through this process yourself. Now to start with, I thought for context I would go through my own experience briefly, which is that my first book, Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, when I received the artwork for that from the lovely illustrator, my sister-in-law, Yevgenia Blackery, she gave me a folder of the art, and at that point we weren't very far from the publication date, and I needed the book to come out on that date because I had some events that I needed the book for. And so it was important that the process of digitizing it was as quick as possible, but also that it didn't require a lot of post-editing and that it was simple. I didn't have the experience in photo editing, image editing, and it was the first time I'd done this, so I needed it all to be easy and straightforward and quick. Whereas with the project I'm working on at the moment, Milk and Cookies, that was illustrated by a lovely lady called Rhiannon Thomas. And when Rhiannon sent me the artwork, that was, I think I received it in April, and we're now in June, so I've had a good couple of months to work on that if I needed to do, I can do more complex things with it, so I had a lot more time. I also have more experience because there's about 2 years in between these two books, so that makes a difference too. But actually, the thing that probably makes the biggest impact is the fact that the artwork is different. So they have different styles. They were both watercolour, but Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, the artwork extends pretty much over the whole page on most of the pieces. There's very little white space, but also the colours were just darker on that one. Whereas with Milk and Cookies, there's a lot of white space. There's also some very, very light washes, so some beautiful blues and pinks. Very, very pale background washes. And so that style difference actually has a really big impact. So with all that in mind, because I will be coming back to my own experience for some hints and tips, let's start off with talking about scanning. Now scanning is really straightforward. This is the method that I use to digitize the artwork for Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, and it's generally inexpensive, easy, and I think that no matter how you end up digitizing the artwork, I would start with trying scanning if you can, because it doesn't take long. It's worth a go to see if it is good enough. Now, this may be something you can do at home. If you have got a decent scanner or you have access to a decent scanner, you might be able to do it with a desktop one. Some desktop scanners are really not up to the job, but some are. I used one recently when I was working on Milk and Cookies a little bit. That was every bit as good as the one that I had paid to use when I digitized the artwork for Lily the Limpet Gets Lost. So there are some really, really good ones out there. So if you have access to a decent one, give it a shot. You want to have your resolution at least 300 dpi. The one I used recently went up to 600, and hey, you might need 300, but why not go higher? And you want to save your files either as a TIFF file or as a PNG. If you save as a JPEG, every time you save a JPEG, you lose a bit of quality. So you want a PNG or a TIFF file. And like I said, you want 300 dpi. Position your artwork and give it a whirl, see how it looks, see if you're happy with it. If you don't have access to a scanner at home, you can go to a copy shop or a print shop or a reprographics shop or whatever they want to call themselves. You will probably have a local place that has one of those big, they're like a big photocopier with a huge scanner on the top of them, and those can usually do a really great job, a really nice, crisp, high resolution, lovely scan. But the issue when you're digitizing artwork is you obviously want the colors to be true, and you want to see all of the beautiful nuances of your piece. Now, when you use any scanner, not just the professional ones, any scanner, because of the light that it uses, it can wash your image out. So you may find that certain colours don't quite look right. The blues can sometimes have a bit of a greeny tinge to them. And if you've got any light washes, like I had in Milk and Cookies, they will disappear before your eyes. So when I digitised the artwork for Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, it did have a couple of spreads that had some light colours on. And the guy in the print shop that I used was able to alter the contrast and the brightness to be able to bring those areas out. When I did the same for Milk and Cookies, there was nothing that could be done. He tried, I tried on the one I had at home, and the best I could do was get a grey so that you could see that the area once used to be there, but you couldn't get the colour. So depending on the kind of artwork you have, depending on the colours you have, the time you have, the money you have, scanning may well be perfectly fine. And when I paid to have the scanning done, it cost me less than £5 to have all the artwork scanned for Lily the Limpet Gets Lost. So scanning can be a really easy and inexpensive way of doing things. However, as I say, with Milk and Cookies, I confidently went to the same print shop and said, do the same please, and there was just nothing that could be done to scan that artwork. So after trying lots of things, I decided to try photography. So let's talk a little bit about photography. Now, the first thing I did was have a play with the cameras I had. So I tried my camera phone, it was not good enough. I tried a bridge camera that I have, it was also not good enough. Now, if you have a decent camera at home, you should be able to use that. None of my cameras had high enough resolution. Luckily, I have a friend who was willing to give this a try, who is a photographer, and so she had a great camera. If you have a photographer friend, or a friend who just happens to be into photography and has a really decent camera, then enlist their help. Particularly if they know how to use the camera, because photography is not as simple as point and click. So yeah, you may want to enlist not just the camera, but the person who's pressing the buttons. It depends what your level of skill is. And so what you want to do is set your piece of art up in such a way that the lighting across it is totally flat, because otherwise when you brighten this image afterwards and you try and edit it, there will be a gradient across it. You will have areas that are obviously lighter than others. So what I would suggest is take one photo and do a rough edit to see how it looks, and then once you're happy, do all of them. So you want a nice flat lighting across it. My friend who helped me with this suggested that because my artwork had lots of white areas and a lot of contrast, that it was helpful to have a day that was bright but also a little bit cloudy. We were using natural light, and that kind of bright but not too bright helped us to get those subtle washes that I was struggling with, whereas if we'd have had a really bright day, we would have had the same bleaching out effect. I have no idea, I'm not a photographer. She photographs the White Cliffs of Dover a lot, and so she's good with contrast, and that was her suggestion, because it's easier to get the lovely colours and then edit it in post than trying to bring those colours back in post. So that was what she suggested. So you want a nice flat light. You also want your piece of art to be as flat as possible. Obviously in a scanner, it's closed down by the lid or however the scanner works, and it's held flat. But if you're trying to photograph it, you need a way of trying to hold it flat. We used magnets on a whiteboard. It worked really well. So try and get your piece nice and flat. Your camera needs to be totally flat on it. You don't want to be more over one side, because then you will get your issues with perspective. You want to be nice and dead on, flat lighting, make sure that the paper is really, really straight, and then have a go at taking the picture. I would say take one, do a rough edit of it, have a look, see if it looks right. If you are happy, then take all of them if you're taking lots and lots and lots. We ended up doing it twice, because the first time around the lighting wasn't flat across it, and I had gradients of colour. So once you're happy with all of those, then you're going to be doing a lot more post editing than you would be with scanning. But actually, it doesn't take too much time. If you want to use something like Photoshop, I personally use GIMP, which is a free alternative, and it works much the same. And so in GIMP, I was cropping the images first of all in the Photos. I use Mac, so in the Photos app you can crop them however you want in any application. And then I was bringing them into GIMP and I was brightening the whole image. I can do a tutorial on how I did this if you would like, so leave me in the comments if you would like me to go through how I did this. But you can look up how to brighten an image in GIMP, or how to fix blemishes in GIMP, or how to sharpen, or any of those things. It's easy to look up and find tutorials on all that stuff. So I brightened them, sharpened them a little bit, and then I cleared up any blemishes, which was exactly the same as with Lily the Limpet. After I had the scans, I still went through and cleared up any little artifacts or blemishes in there. And then I exported those files as PNGs so that I could import them into Canva and then format them. So yes, it did require a little bit of post-editing, and yes, sometimes I had to fiddle around with the colour and the brightness to get it looking right. So looking at the pros and cons then, scanning is simple, cheap. I mean, unless you buy your own scanner, but you really don't need to, you can pay to use a professional one. And in general, doesn't really need very much post-editing. However, the cons are that it will wash your artwork out and that it may impact the colours of your artwork. So sometimes, as with Milk and Cookies, it's just totally unsuitable. Whereas with photography, it requires a bit more skill in the actual photography itself. It also requires more skill in editing, so it is generally harder to do. And if you have to buy a camera, it's expensive, but then you could say the same if you had to buy a scanner. But I would say more people can access a local print shop or somebody with a decent scanner than people can access somebody with a good camera. I could be wrong there, but that would be my opinion. So a little bit harder there as well, or a little bit more expensive. Of course, you can pay to have your artwork photographed professionally. I missed that part out, and that's also very expensive. But you can just pay to have that done, and there are specialist services to do that, or you could pay a photographer for studio time, of course, to work on that. So that is an option as well. But I would say the photography one, a little bit trickier to access, or potentially more expensive if you're paying for a professional to do it. But you will get better colour and you won't have that bleaching out effect. So it depends what your artwork is like, it depends what your time scale is, it depends what your budget is. But I would say give scanning a go. If it's good enough, brilliant. If it's not, then you can have a go at doing a bit of photography and editing and see how you get on with that. Of course, you can just start with the photography if you've got the skills involved and you know that that's the route that you want to go down. So I hope that you have found that helpful. I will link some useful videos below. And if you did find that useful, please do hit like. Leave me a comment if you've got any tips to add. Always helpful to have lots of resources in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this one.